Hey there, Pastor Marc here. It's our prayer that this message would encourage and equip you in your relationship with Jesus. We're able to provide this content due to the joyful generosity of our financial partners. And if you'd be willing to join that tribe and help get some sermons like this around the world, you can donate at harvestbaptist.info/give. God bless.
I want to just review very, very quickly with you. We're talking about how we change as Christians for the better, and what does kind of that scope and sequence of being a disciple of Jesus look like. And we've been using a river as our analogy, that you start with your faith in Jesus. Those are the headwaters. And that river starts to form kind of a primary channel, which is the gospel of Jesus. You need to know and believe and be rooted in the gospel. But you start to have particular, what we're calling tributaries, that begin to dump into your spiritual river that help and assist you to become more like Jesus. So you would have the Spirit of Jesus first and foremost, the Word of Jesus, the Church of Jesus, even the practices of Jesus. And we've walked through these in almost painstaking detail for you to be able to understand what these are and why they exist. But all of this moves in a particular direction, or you could even say a set of directions. There are three end points for a disciple of Jesus. There are three goals that really are at the heart of us reading our Bible or going to church or walking in the Spirit. All that we do is meant to aim at us being with Jesus, us spending time with him. That's what discipleship was about at its core. You would be with your master, you'd be with your rabbi all the time. Us not just being with Jesus, but us being like Jesus. It is paramount that you're with him in order to be like him. You have to start with, and then you have to go to like. But we're with him, we abide in him, and then he begins to produce fruit in our life, and we begin to be conformed to his image. But when you're with him and you start to become like him, then you want to begin making disciples of Jesus. Those are the three goals. With Jesus, like Jesus, making disciples of Jesus. And those have always been the three goals. Those were the goals for the early disciples, for Peter, James, and John. Those are the goals for us as 21st century American Christians. But that's the conclusion of discipleship. We have kind of the heart of discipleship, which is with Jesus. We have the shape of discipleship, which is like Jesus. And the conclusion of discipleship is that we would make other disciples of Jesus. Now, there was a process by which Jesus made disciples and allowed them to become disciple makers. And that process that he utilized really is no different than how he goes about us becoming disciple makers today. The process at its core of what that looked like for, say, Peter or the Apostle Paul is not any different really at its core for what that would look like for you and me. And here is, in one sentence, what that process looked like. In community, over time, Jesus gave his disciples more and more responsibility until they were ready to lead others themselves. That is a really quick summary of how you might become a disciple maker. In community, over time, there's more and more responsibility that is given to you until you are ready to lead others yourselves. That sentence is going to form the backbone of our sermon today, and we'll just base our points off of that. The first is in community. Jesus did not have a Talmud, which is a disciple. He had a Talmudim, which is a group of disciples. Jesus wasn't a private tutor. Do we get that? Jesus was someone who had a group of disciples, a very large group of disciples, honestly, hundreds, perhaps even thousands, but we would best know the inner group that he called to be with him full time, the 12 disciples of Jesus. We would know them the best, but that was community. Everything that they did, when they learned, when they went and practiced something, hey, pray like this, when they helped Jesus, that was all done in the context of community, helping each other, encouraging each other, praying for each other. It was meant to be that way. There wasn't some sort of Lone Ranger apprenticeship to Jesus. That's not how it went. There's the constant idea in the scriptures for us that our relationship with Jesus is very personal. It's very personal, but it's not meant to be private. There may be little slivers of it that are private, but on the whole, our relationship with Jesus, when we're with him and start to become like him, that's a personal thing, but not a private thing. That's meant to be done in the context of community, most specifically inside the context of a church. One of the primary functions of a church is to put all of the disciples of Jesus together in one bucket, if you will, so that we can become more like Jesus together. And there's so many things in your own maturation and growth that will never, ever, ever happen unless you're together. You need people to offend you and to step on your toes and to be annoying. And you're like, well, that's why Bob exists in my small group. He's so annoying. Yes. You need that so you can learn to forgive and to be patient and to be long-suffering and learn forbearance. You have to have that in community. You have to have people that see your blind spots and point those out to you and correct faulty thinking and speak truth into your life. You can't do that on your own. You can't. It has to be in community. And sometimes we forget that Jesus himself lived in community. And he experienced the full gamut of what it was to be human because he had to live with a bunch of other smelly dudes. And they were annoying to him at times. And they fought with each other, and he had to correct them, and he had to roll his eyes and say, guys, when is this going to sink in? I thought I told you this already. And eventually, sometimes he'd throw up his hands and say, if you got ears to hear, then you can hear. I'm done teaching you. You know, like that was constant because he was in community. I want that to sink in. Jesus and his disciples lived in community. You can't do discipleship really without that. If you want to really grow into what Jesus has for you, that is a process, but it happens inside of a community. Now, I want to point out in our modern day and age that community is different than connectivity. This is an important note. We are more connected than we ever have been. We have our phones, and we have FaceTime, and we have text messages, and we have emails, and we have Slack messages, and we have direct messages, and we have social media, and we can see what they're doing, and we can like it, and we can comment, and we can be so connected, as it were. But community, if connectivity in some way, shape, or form is on the rise, community is definitely not in vogue any longer. Gone are the days where the rule is families have dinner around a dinner table and they have their own little family community. That's now the exception, not the rule. Gone are the days where you build your new home and you emphasize the front porch. If you built a home recently, you may have emphasized the front porch, and you could be the exception, not the rule. But it's very likely that you emphasized a double garage door that closes you in and the back deck with a fence around it so that people can leave you alone. And I'm not even mad about that. I'm just saying that's how it is. I did the same thing, okay? The Elks Lodge, the bowling leagues, those things where you had to go to find people and be with them, but you were really with them. Like you didn't have your phone with you, right? That was at home, like on a rotary dial or on the wall or whatever it was, and it wasn't in your pocket. So when you were there bowling, you were there with your friends. That was it. You were in community. We have less and less and less community, but we have more and more connectivity. And what happens is you do terrible damage if you don't mind this. You do terrible damage to your Christian walk where you never have solitude. You never have time alone just with God where you're turning it off. There's always an AirPod. There's always some music. There's always a podcast. There's always a radio. There's always something going. So you never have any solitude. But then you're connected, but you're not really in community. So you don't have any community. And you have this terrible bootleg middle broke option that's connectivity. And you're doing away with solitude and community. And your spiritual life and just your emotional life, your whole life is the worse for it. Jesus had a group of people that were in community, and they were together. This is why, as a church, we are push, and we make no bones about it. We push, and we push you. Like we text you, and we email, and we announce to you, and we do everything we can outside of literally twisting your arm to get you into like a small group every fall and every winter, because you need that community. I understand as a pastor that this room that exists right now, or existed in the previous service, where we all come and we hear preaching and we sing together, this room serves great purposes. But this room is not going to scratch the itch of community for you if you think, well, I'm just going to say hi and bye during handshaking time for 5 minutes and get to know my neighbor who I sit by every week a little bit. That's not going to do it. There are a lot of methods by which you could try to instill community inside of your church, especially as a church grows and gets larger, and it's like, I don't know half these people here. We have chosen to use groups, to use small groups, to try to put you together where, like, on a consistent basis, like, I don't know, 40 out of 52 weeks a year or something, you're with them and you're exchanging prayer requests with them and you're studying the Bible with them and you're doing a service activity together with them and you're going to the group member's house to go have a bonfire and hang out, and you're doing that together in community. It's why do we push and just beat the drum like another group's open enrollment? Get this over with already, you know? Why do we do that? We do that because we want you to be in community, because you need that in order for discipleship and maturation to happen. You really do. You do. So today, if this is a good step for you, I know most of you are in some sort of small group. We have lots of them. They're all over the place. They're on Sundays and Wednesdays in the middle of the week and Saturdays, but those are all over the place. To give you options, there's literally a table with balloons in the lobby today. You can go there, you can get some options that are what groups exist and what do they look like and what demographics, and we'll help you. We'll make that easy. If you're scared to get into those, we will do our best to make that like bar of entry super low. We'll tell you up front, we're not going to make you pray out loud. We're not going to make you read like a Bible verse out loud. No one's going to call your name and say, tell us what that doctrine means. Like, no one will make you participate if you're introverted. We'll do our best to make that easy on you, but you've got to opt in. You've got to choose, I want to be in community. I want to actually have other people who know me and I know them, and we're encouraging each other, we're praying for each other, and we love each other. So all of this was done inside of community. All of it was. But it was also done over time. In community, over time. This is an important note, especially if you're new to faith. We live in a world that is FedEx and Amazon Prime 2-day shipping and microwaves, which I'm all for. But you can't FedEx Christ-likeness overnight. You can't. You can't microwave character. This is something that takes time. You becoming like Jesus and you even learning how to make disciples of Jesus is a process, and it's a long process. Like not weeks and not months, but years. For every single person, that's different depending on your background, depending on how much you apply yourself, depending on how gung-ho you go, trying to learn the Bible and trying to meet other people and all those sorts of things. But I can promise you, for every person, that's a process, a continual, ongoing process. The Christian life is a walk. It's not a sprint. Even if we're told that we do run a race, but the context of that race is like a long race. Like we're not going to just sprint and all of a sudden in 3 months, I took that course, I listened to that podcast, I read that book, and abracadabra, here I am, the spitting image of Jesus. That's not going to happen. I wish it did in some respects, but it just doesn't. This is something that took time for the disciples to go from, I want to be with Jesus, right? I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm making that decision. To Jesus turning them loose to go make other disciples, like full-time leading other people. That was a 3-year process for them. Okay? They had Jesus as their teacher, and they were with him incessantly. If it took those guys with Jesus as their teacher, and they were with him 24/7, How long do you think it's going to take your small group leader when you're together for an hour and a half a week? You say, well, that would be quite some time. Yeah, it's going to be a long time. So embrace that. Be okay with that. Understand that this is a journey and a walk. And you know what? Little by little, piece by piece, I want to learn and I want to grow. And I want to be able to look back year over year and say, I've learned some, I've matured some, I've developed some. Now, if you're anything like me, you'll say, okay, I've matured here. Then I have this whole new group of things I didn't even know I needed to mature in, but I got a whole new list of things that I need to look more like Jesus. And that keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening. It happens over time. Take even someone like the Apostle Paul. You know, we know the Apostle Paul largely from his writings. And those writings are, I started a church, and now I'm writing back to that church. So many times Christians get this sense that even the Apostle Paul was like, he came to faith, and then he just started planting churches, gung-ho. He just went after it. And you don't realize that there was a long process before he was the leader that we know and think of as the Apostle Paul. We know he gets saved on the road to Damascus, and we're told in Galatians that Paul spends 3 years in Arabia and in Damascus. Doing what? Not leading, best we know. Learning, growing, developing his Christ-likeness and his own Christian walk. We don't have much from that time period because he's not planting churches. He's not the Apostle Paul as we know him. Then he goes to Jerusalem, and when he goes to Jerusalem, he doesn't show up on the scene with his cape flapping in the wind and say, here I am, the Apostle Paul. He doesn't do that. He comes in, and he is not the chief. He's the Indian. And he's directed and instructed, and there's other church leaders who are calling the shots, and they're pairing him up with Barnabas, who is a church leader in his own respect, and they're sending them. Like, he is the one who's reporting for duty in the direct report and saying, like, where do you want me to go? Well, go over to Antioch. And he spends a year in Antioch. At this point, you're talking 4, if not 5 years have gone by since this man came to faith. And finally in Antioch, the church leaders, it's not Paul who takes the bull by the horns and says, I must go plant churches, the Lord has called me, get out of my way. That's not what he does. The Lord lays it on their heart, and the church leaders pray and they fast, and they send Paul with Barnabas, likely because he needed Barnabas, and he wasn't ready to stand on his own 2 feet by himself just yet. And it's still at least another year or two before he's just on his own 2 feet, planting churches and just putting people under his wing and becoming their father in the faith and being the Apostle Paul as we know him. But you're talking about 5 to 7 years of growth and maturity and learning before he's the chief. He's the Indian for a long time. And this was a man who knew the scriptures, who had a leadership capability that was already intact. This was a grown man, right? But it took time. It took time for him to grow and mature. Do you think that I or you will be any different in that? No. No, we won't. It's in community, and it's over time. And when this happened, community over time, Jesus gave his disciples more and more responsibility until they were ready to lead others. There was this incremental entrustment that happened that allowed them to grow. And when you think about it, it's common sense, but sometimes we get the sense that the apostles themselves or pastors, it's like, the Matrix. Like you just download all of the knowledge and all of the doctrine and all the stuff onto them, and it's just like, poof, there they are. They showed up and they're the pastor. This happened overnight. No, it didn't. This was very incremental. I think perhaps the best window into how this works is still what we do in the trades. If you're a plumber or you're an electrician, something like that, there is a journey that takes place in order to become a master plumber or a master electrician. So let's say I'm going to pick Brad as an example here. Let's say Brad said, I want to become an electrician. Well, Brad's not wiring a house next week or next year. Brad's going to have to go be an apprentice for years. where he is getting education, he's getting knowledge, he's learning, he is assisting another electrician who's a journeyman or a master electrician in small ways and just retrieving their tools, or he may even just go get lunch for the crew, or like he's the lackey, right? He's running around doing little stuff, he's observing a lot, but he's not leading. Eventually, after years of learning and observing and being there, you can be a journeyman. And now you can lead in some ways and you can have an apprentice under you, but you still are not the chief. There's still a master electrician over you, checking your work, supervising you. You're not responsible for the project, but you're in this middle ground of I'm leading some, but I'm also not leading fully. And eventually, if you keep going, you could be a master electrician, where you could be the one that's primarily responsible for wiring the house or for training and leading these other people. But that's a journey. And if you look at the disciples of Jesus and you do a survey of the Gospels, you find that they really effectively go from apprentice mode to journeyman mode to master teacher mode. There is this incremental progression that takes place where they get more and more and more responsibilities. And I want to walk through just a brief survey of little snippets from the life of the disciples to show you when they were early on in an apprentice mode, what did that look like? What sort of tasks were they responsible with? How did they go make disciples as an apprentice? Then when they grew up a little bit, well, what did that look like? How were they making disciples as maybe a journeyman, we'll call them? Then eventually, when they're turned loose to be on their own and be a fisher of men, Jesus would call it, which is not a clever pun. It's more of a cliche for a master teacher, someone who could get inside of their net the minds and hearts and imaginations of men and teach them well. Jesus always had his goal that they would get to be a fisher of men, but they don't get there till Matthew chapter number 28. You know, what does this journey look like over 3 years? I want to lay it out for you. I'm going to warn you up front. This is going to be a lot of verses. It's going to be a little bit teachy, but it will have a boatload of application for your life no matter where you're at. If you've been saved for a week or you've been saved for 50 years, there'll be a boatload of application, and you'll be able to see how you can make disciples no matter what part of the journey you're in. So you're with Jesus and like Jesus, wanting to make disciples of Jesus. What does this look like? Well, in the apprentice level for the disciples, there were several things that they did. They did evangelism invitations. They didn't do a ton of evangelism proper, where they're like telling someone about Jesus and like, you know, praying with this person and showing them everything about Jesus. But they did a lot of come and see. Come and see. Let me introduce you to Jesus. Let me get you to where you can learn more. You find this in John chapter number 1, that one of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew. This is Simon Peter's brother. Andrew first found his own brother, Simon Peter, and he said unto him, we found the Messiah, which is the Christ, and he brought him to Jesus. This was an evangelistic invitation. It was, hey, come meet Jesus. He told him a little bit about Jesus, what he knew about him. He had a glowing review, obviously, 5 stars. But just come meet Jesus. You find just a few verses later that Philip found Nathanael, and he said unto him, we found him of whom Moses and the law and the prophets did write. It's Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said, can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? You mean that podunk little place? No, not Nazareth. And Philip said to him, come and see. What are they doing? They're inviting people to come and see. If you are like new to faith, even early on, as an apprentice to Jesus, one of the best things you can do, if you say, well, I don't know how to share everything about Jesus. I don't know all the verses. And they may ask me a question. I don't know what to say. Come and see, right? Invite them. Invite them into your small group. Invite them to church. Invite them to Friend Day. Invite them to the Christmas hey, this is a place where the believers of Jesus get together and Jesus meets with us and we talk about Jesus and we look at his words. Invite them to come and see and to come and learn and introduce them to a pastor or to your group leader or to whoever it is. That's something you can do It's something you can do immediately. You can you can text invitations. You can hand them out physically. We have a bunch of physical little invite cards by all of our exit doors. It's a way for you to start the process of making disciples. You also found that they did general assistance and logistics. I love these moments. They're all over the Gospels if you pay attention to them, where the disciples are like errand boys. Remember that story in John chapter number 4, where Jesus is at the well, and there's this Samaritan woman who comes, and he like evangelizes and talks to her about himself, and she puts her faith in Jesus. Anyone remember that story? Let me get a raise of hands. Okay, most of you do. Why was Jesus all by himself, lonesome? Why was he there by himself? Right? He did life in community. He didn't just sit on a rock by himself and talk to people, but he's by himself this time. Read the text. It'll tell you very plainly. Jesus looked at his boys, and they traveled a long time that day, and he sat down and he said, boys, I'm tired and I'm hungry. As a matter of fact, I got a hankering for some protein. He didn't say it exactly that way, but he said, I want some meat. He didn't want bread. He didn't want fruit. He said, I want some meat. And the disciples said, well, we'll get you some meat. What do you want? And Jesus said, bacon, of course, it's the best. Now, he was Jewish. He didn't say that. He didn't say bacon. Definitely not. I want some chipped ham from Community Market. It's right down the street. Go get some, whatever it was, right? So off they went. They're fetching him lunch. That's what they were doing. That was their job. And it's a hilarious story because when they get back, they have food, and Jesus is like, I'm not hungry anymore. I've already eaten. And they're like, who gave you food? And he's like, my food is to do the will of the Father. And he's having this big spiritual moment. And they're like, how'd you get a hot dog, man? I don't know how this happened. But all they did, right, they're just logistics. It's all through the Gospels, the whole time. The upper room happened. Guess what happened in the upper room? They had the Passover. Jesus washed their feet. It's this beautiful episode. Somebody had to go clean the room. Somebody had to go get the food. Somebody had to make the food. Somebody had to set up the utensils. Guess who did that? The disciples did. Jesus had to get into Jerusalem before that upper room on a donkey. Guess who went and fetched the donkey? It's another hilarious episode where he's like, hey, go over to like the corner of Market and Main. There's a donkey tied up by the old saloon. And they're like, okay. He's like, get it, untie it and bring it to me. And like, is that your donkey? No, it ain't my donkey. What if someone stops us and says, why are you stealing our donkey? Just tell them I need it. Okay. And then you have to go like steal a donkey. They didn't really steal it. He didn't encourage them to sin, okay? But all they did was go fetch a donkey so that Jesus could ride in his triumphal entry. And I could show you this over and over and over again. Or they're running logistics. You say, well, that's not very like appealing. There's not a lot of luster to that. No, it's not very public facing. I'm sure they wouldn't get a lot of credit. You're right. There's crowd and event management that they do. That's the same way. It's very administrative. Remember when Jesus has the whole feeding of the 5,000 episode, and he blesses it and he breaks it, but then he's like, you guys carry the baskets and walk around and deal with the hungry people. And he sends them to go pass it all out and to be the ushers for the day. Remember when Jesus rebuked them for not bringing the children to him and said, don't stop the kids from coming to me. Why was he telling them that? Because they were responsible to be the bouncers and to manage the crowd and to manage the line. Everybody wanted in to see Jesus, and they had to do crowd management. They had to be security. That's just what they were doing. Now, think about this in the context of a local church. There is a boatload of things that happen that sometimes but honestly, it's not typically me at this point. It's a lot of you all. We do on a weekly basis that would look a lot like this. I don't preach a sermon. I just set up chairs and tear down chairs. I don't lead a small group, but I mow the lawn every 2 weeks and I help out with weed eating. I don't lead the music on Sunday, but I stand at the door, and my parents had enough money to get me good dental work, so I got a good smile, and I hand people the bulletin as they walk in. Good dental work isn't a requirement to be a greeter, by the way. It's helpful, but it's not a requirement. I'm on the admin team. I just do spreadsheets behind the scenes. I just run the camera. I just click the buttons to make the audio happen, which doesn't seem like it's all that shiny, right? But what are you doing? You are facilitating ministry. All of those things are essential. Just like getting a donkey and setting up a room and passing out bread and going to get meat from community market or whatever it was, just like all of those things were essential for the disciples to do that allowed ministry to happen for Jesus, that is essential for ministry to happen. Don't ever belittle your job because you think that it's not that important, that it's trivial. It's not trivial. You are helping disciples be made informed when you cut the lawn. You are. You're helping disciples be made informed when you check that kid in to kids ministry and they still don't know how to print their sticker for the 18th time or where to put the trash from the sticker that's left over in the trash can. And I tell you this every week. How can you not know that you're doing ministry? And don't do it with attitude, by the way. Love them and be patient with them and help them along. But all of those things matter. We were actually just talking about this a little bit this week. We have our staff training every August. It's the middle of August as we come back into, for us, our fiscal year starts in August. Our school year starts in August. So it's kind of a starting point for the new year for us as a ministry team. And we get together, we do some training, and we pray together. We even break up all over campus, and we have just time with Jesus, and people are doing prayer walks and reading their Bible all over the place and those sorts of things. And we have fun sometimes too. Not sometimes, every time. We have fun too. We'll play some golf, or last year I think we went to the upper Yakagani and we got some kayaks and we went rafting together and just team building, those sorts of things. But Pastor Dom was giving us a lesson just on Thursday in our staff training about how all of the things that we do behind the scenes, even in a support role, is spiritual scaffolding that helps ministry function and how important it is. And he was so right. The disciples as apprentices, they didn't do anything big and glamorous. They didn't. But they did a lot of things that helped ministry happen, and it was so important, and it's part of the discipleship making process. Just them being a little fly on the wall for so many of Jesus' moments were deeply, deeply important to them. So if you clean a building or run sound or play an instrument in the orchestra or just invite people to church regularly, listen, thumbs up. Keep it up. That matters. You're making disciples of Jesus in your own way. You really are. But then there's not just apprentice level stuff. There eventually became this journeyman level stuff where they now are being entrusted with more ministerial responsibilities, you could say, more leadership responsibilities, even short term. You see this in examples of supervised ministry. So in John 4, we're told that the Pharisees are getting worried about Jesus because Jesus makes more disciples than John the Baptist did, and he's baptizing more people than John the Baptist did. Jesus had a lot of people that were baptized, but it goes on to tell us in verse 2, Jesus didn't baptize himself, but his disciples did the baptizing. Now what's happening there? Well, he's giving them a big moment for someone to come and to be baptized under Jesus and to be baptized in the name of Jesus. This is a big ministerial moment for them and for this person. But Jesus wouldn't do it. He would supervise them, and the disciples would do all of the baptizing. So they were entrusted with more in this way. We will have a window into this today after our service. We have 2 being baptized today, and those 2 that are being baptized, their dads are baptizing them. Technically under my supervision, but they are doing the baptizing. And they are going to, and that's legitimate, that's not unbiblical in any way, shape, or form, that they're going to make disciples in that way and have a special moment with their own child to do the baptism. Now, not every dad wants to do that, to stand up and talk in front of people and those sorts of things. That's not for everybody, but we'll have some of that today, and it'll be a beautiful moment for those kids and for those dads. You find that they have deeper trainings and opportunities. I'm not going to read a bunch to you, but think about just all of those that maybe would come to your mind quickly. They were able to have the masses sent away and go spend time with Jesus by themselves and have deeper training. They were able to be on the Mount of Transfiguration. They were able to be with Jesus in the garden and Jesus say, hey, watch with me and pray. I'm going to teach you about prayer. Don't fall asleep on me. And let's pray for a little bit together. They were able to be a fly on the wall and to be trained in deeper ways than the average citizen, so to speak. And this began to form them in deeper ways. Then you even find that they had small doses of leadership that were entrusted to them. Now don't miss this. At this point, there's a lot of things going on that I just rattled off at you, but don't miss this. In Mark chapter number 6, we're told that Jesus takes the 12, not the hundreds of disciples, but he takes the 12. And these ones, he entrusts them. He sends them forth 2 by 2, and he gives them power over unclean spirits. Okay, this is a milestone. This is a line of demarcation. I'm going to trust you in deeper, richer, fuller ways now. I want you to go in pairs. I don't want you to go by yourself. I want you to go in a pair. I want you to actually cast out some devils like you've seen me do. Verse number 12, they went out and they preached that men should repent. I want you to represent my interests. You've now heard me preach enough that I think that you can regurgitate my sermon. You've heard me go tell people that they need to repent for the kingdom of God is at hand. It's your turn now to go preach that sermon and represent my interest in my message. And I'm going to send you out 2 by 2. It was temporary. They went out, then they had to report. And wouldn't you know it, they went out and they had some success, so to speak, but they also had failures. They'd come back and say, Jesus, we tried to mess with that demonic spirit that's, oppressing that boy, and we couldn't do it. And Jesus would look at them and say, well, that actually comes by prayer and fasting. I haven't taught you that one just yet, but you're going to have to pray and you're going to have to fast more, and eventually you'll get there. But you're not at that level yet. This was formation, right? He's training, he's entrusting little by little, piece by piece, so that eventually they can get to a point where they can lead others by themselves. I think about my own personal life and journey that I became the lead pastor, I guess is my title. Here I serve with a team of pastors that I love deeply here at the church. But that responsibility was placed on me. I was 29 at the time, which I told you all then, and I still stand by, was entirely too young. But here we are. That was not a 2-year in the making process. That was a 29-year in the making process of growing up in church, being around church, being a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old who didn't do ministry, but just was dad's shadow when dad went and did ministry. And I didn't know I was learning by osmosis at the time when dad went into the hospital room to make a visit because someone just had something big happen in their life, or when dad was evangelizing and witnessing that person. I just wanted to be with my dad, We're just hanging out together, being together, and I'm just observing ministry happen and tagging along for the journey all the time. Or my parents are dragging me to church, not literally, but it's like, I never minded going to church as a kid, but I did mind when we had to go super early. Because it would be like, we have this meeting or we have this music practice or whatever it is, and I'm just sitting in the church pew by myself, can't run in church, can't do anything fun. I'm just sitting there while mom's playing the piano with someone else, just being there. And that was elementary. I didn't do a lot myself. I can remember as a kid, once I got to be 3rd or 4th grade or something, we'd go through the drive-thru, and my dad would hand me a little church invite card and say, you invite them. And I would be so nervous. I'd heard him do it a million times. I knew exactly what to say, but I was nervous to go give this invite card to somebody as a little kid. I can remember in junior high, we had a rubric in our church that when you were in 7th and 8th grade, you could help in kids ministry if it was the kindergartners. There was enough of an age gap. You couldn't be the chief or lead it, but you could go be an Indian and you could go help. If you were in 9th and 10th grade, you could help with 1st through 3rd graders. If you were in 11th and 12th grade, you could help with the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And that was every week. Growing up as a kid, that was every single week. 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, going and helping somebody in a kids ministry. I can still remember the first time I had a chance to teach someone else the Bible. Kay Campbell, tall blonde lady who was my mom's friend, who taught first graders. I was in 9th grade. And Kay Campbell said, "Would you come teach my first graders a Sunday school lesson?" I did not want to say yes. I think she had told my mom, maybe my mom asked her to ask me. I don't even know. But all I know is I ended up in Kay's classroom teaching a lesson to first graders. I don't remember what I taught. I'm sure it was terrible, but it was an experience. And the next year she asked me, and the next year she asked me, and I could keep going and going. Go to Bible college, and hey, would you start teaching 5th grade, lead the class every week with 5th grade boys, and then eventually some senior high boys, and then would you take the youth group, or would you do this or that? And that was incremental for decades. Long before I was ever Pastor Marc, I was a little pimple-faced 7th grader helping in junior church. That's how it goes. Now, was I making disciples as a 7th grader? I was trying. I was sincerely trying to help some kids learn about Jesus inside of there, even if I was just monitoring the bathroom line or whatever it was. But I was there, and I am now, but that's incremental over time. So those of you, here's my encouragement. Those of you who want to skip apprenticeship and go straight to journeyman and start to lead other people, you know what? I want to be an assistant group leader, or I want to have the ministry team under me, or I want to be responsible for this. Listen, you can't skip apprenticeship and go straight to journeyman. You can't. There's going to be some reps. There's going to be some time. Just practically speaking, go get involved. I'll have sometimes people come to me and say, "Pastor, the Lord's laid on my heart. I want to be in full-time ministry, or I want to be a missionary one day. We went on this mission trip over to wherever it was, South America, and God put on my heart, I want to do that with my life." And I'll tell them the same thing every time. Get neck deep in serving in the church. And not even leadership responsibilities, just go serve. Because the more you can serve, the better that's going to go over the course of time. So some of you want to skip. You just want to skip ahead and start leading other people or preach a sermon. It doesn't work that way. It never has. It never will. Even Paul told Timothy, get some pastors, but make sure they're not a novice. Make sure they didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. We got to be sure that these are not newbies. Some of you, though, you could go from apprentice to journeyman, and you're hesitating. You're ready to not just sing in the choir, but to say, "Matt, can you put 10 people under me that I could be responsible for, to love them and encourage them and pray for them and be a little shepherd inside of the choir?" Hey, I've been in group for years. Group leader, you need some help? I'd love to be your assistant. I'd love to organize all the activities. I'd love to be responsible for prayer requests. I'd love to cover for you when you're out of town, those 3 weeks. I'd love to fill in. Some of you are there, and you need to kind of take some steps. You need to have some responsibility. Once again, we'll help you with this, okay? I'm trying to make this as bottom shelf and as practical as a sermon you've ever heard in your life. We will help you with this. Same table, same balloons. If you want some groups or you want some information on serving, same table, same balloons. It's in the lobby today. Go there. We're ready for you. We will equip you, we will help you, we will give you a slot, we'll give you a rep, we'll give you an opportunity. We are here to help you grow, but there has to be some sort of desire to want to grow in this. Now, eventually, Jesus got to the point where in this community over time, more and more responsibility is given so that they were ready to lead others, where they were ready to stand on their own 2 feet and be the leaders themselves. To be the missionary, to be the pastor, to be the church planner, to be the group leader, whatever it was. You find this in Matthew 28, where Jesus finally turns them loose. Says, "Go on. Go make disciples. It's your turn now. You've done it in doses, but I'm passing the baton to you. Go make disciples, baptize them, teach them to observe all the things. You go get that done. You go start training other people. You start investing in them." Now, it takes time to get there, but eventually he's there. Some of you are already there. I do want to say a giant, huge, 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 huge thank you to you all as a church family. Because on the whole, your heartbeat is one of like, I want to do something for Jesus. And I commend you for that. On the whole, your heartbeat is, I don't just want to be a spiritual Dead Sea that takes in but never gives out. I know you all relatively well. And I know that there's so many hearts that are, I want to be with Jesus and I want to be like Jesus so that I can go help other people. I want to get on that mission trip. I want to lead in that group. I want to serve as much as I can. I want to be here. I want to roll my sleeves up. And I know that. So this is not meant to be corrective, really. But there are a handful of you who you just don't, maybe you don't understand the importance, maybe you don't understand the goal of what God's plan for your life is, but He has a plan for you to help other people with what you've learned. To take your faith and to take your knowledge and to take your heart or your passion and to pass that on to somebody else, to mentor them, to disciple them, to help them, to influence them, to impact them. He has a goal and a plan for you to do that, for every single one of you. You don't have to be a pastor to do that. And if you don't understand that, I want it to click, and I want you to get after it. I want you to get after it. I want you to say, hey, is there some kingdom responsibility that I'm shouldering like week to week in my life? And if there's not, I'm going to get some. I'll do whatever. Friend day's coming up. I'll raise my hand. You need someone to help you make tacos for the day? You need someone to set up chairs and a tent on Saturday? What do you need? I don't care what it is. I just want to be in the game. I want to play. I want to help. And if you're someone who tends to be I'll have other people invest in me, I'll have other people teach me, I'll have other people greet me, I'll have other people take care of my kids, I'll have other people sing to me, I'll have a pastor preach to me, I'll have all that happen, but I don't really want to do much myself, I'm here to tell you that's not healthy. It's not healthy for you or for a church. God has a plan for you to be involved in the discipleship making process. He wants you to be with Him, He wants you to be like Him, and He wants you to make disciples. He wants you to do it. And I want you to do it. I'm for you, 1,000,000%.